Welcome to the Eldorado Gaming Deck Doctor Series.
Eldorado Gaming is your site for premier accessories like metal dice and playmats. Eldorado Gaming sponsors the My Mythical Meta podcast,
And the Deck Doctor Series features Magic the Gathering decks submitted by our patrons at patreon.com/mymythicalmeta.
subscribe to the channel, and comment with your own suggestions or questions for the players.
Welcome back to My Mythical Meta. We are starting a new feature series here, the Deck Doctor Series. And this is our first deck in the series from our number one patron, David. For our first premiere Deck Doctor video, I am joined by my good friend, Derek.
The horrors persist, yet so do I.
Derek and Benjamin are without a doubt the best deck builders in our meta, and it gives me no end of pleasure to see, Derek, what you have in store for this deck. Some of the crazy card combos you've thought of, and some ways to really push this deck's power level to the top. David sent us this deck and told us that this is his first Commander deck for Magic the Gathering. Our patron David is usually a Yu-Gi-Oh player, but loves the show, and he's dipping his toes into Magic the Gathering. I want to say, from this first glance, I was very impressed with his first attempt. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is light years better than what my first deck looked like. I still have that deck, I think, unchanged, and it was just a mono green deck, but boy, it did not have much going for it.
Oh my god, same here. One of my first commander decks was Avacyn Angel of Hope, who costs 8 mana, and that was before I ever learned about ramp. So, I would just spend games not ever getting to her, and wondering what the problem was with the deck.
Yeah.
So, David is really light years ahead of where we were at this point, and he's got a lot of card knowledge and strategy knowledge under his belt. He already knows a lot about card advantage from his experience with Yu-Gi-Oh! And just adding in a little bit of resource management and what we think is going to help this deck. We're going to tweak some levels a bit and kind of up the raw power. But David, we think you have an awesome deck going for you. So listeners, if you want your decks to be checked over by some great deck builders who are members of a really fun, highly optimized, not hyper-competitive meta, but we do create powerful decks, and if you want us to take a look at your deck and create a feature for it, you can become a Patreon as well by going to patreon.com/mymythicalmeta. All right, Derek, tell us about David's commander. What did he decide to go with for his very first commander deck?
He went with a real strong outing, Miirym Sentinel Wurm. It's red, green, blue, and 3 generic mana for a Dragon Spirit 6/6 with flying, ward 2. Whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token that's a copy of it, except the token isn't legendary. That's important if that dragon is legendary.
I mean, Derek, what would you have done if you were just getting into Magic and there was a creature like this that said you play one dragon, get another one for free?
I mean, imagine I started and get Shaftless out, which is deal damage, get a ton of dinosaurs. I mean, we're talking 2 mana difference in slightly different colors. Yeah.
This card calls out to the Timmies among us who love big creatures. Miirym Sentinel Wurm only costs 6 mana to get a 6/6 flying, and he has ward 2. A lot of people, I think, don't give ward a ton of credit, but that makes a Swords to Plowshares to get rid of Miirym cost 3 mana. Doesn't that leave just a bitter taste in your mouth?
It's like, oh god, I'll let someone else deal with it, and then they don't deal with it. It just compounds.
I'm telling you, no one deals with it, and it's because that ward has prevented people from pulling the trigger. Obviously, getting a free dragon for every dragon you cast.
I went to EDH Rec, just as a goof, looked at top commanders of the past 2 years. It is ranked number 3.
Of all the top commanders in the last 2 years?
All the top commanders in the last 2 years, rank 3 with 22,000 decks.
Oh my god. I mean, there's a reason for it. This is a
Yeah.
really powerful deck. And we think that David actually came to this deck with some things that you're not going to see in a lot of other Miirym Sentinel Wurm decks. This is clearly a Dragon Turbo beatdown deck. David even said in his message to us that he loves dragons in Yu-Gi-Oh! They're very flavorful. The art is cool for tons of dragons. And that was just something that he wanted to carry over. My Mythical Meta as a podcast does have an Archidect account, and David's deck is going to be in the show notes in our Archidect account. So you can find that link in the show description, and in the deck, the cards that are in the sideboard are the cards that we have removed from the deck. All of the other cards, the cards that we think he should add to the deck, are in a category titled New. So whenever you load up that deck and take a look at what we're talking about, there is one big category called New. The cards in the sideboard are the cards we think he should remove. And there are a few cards still in his deck that we're not going to talk about today, just because we think that they were staples in the category or that they were just other good picks that didn't fall into whatever the rest of what we were talking about. The dogs are in the room with me again, so if you hear collars or scratching or whatever, that's them. Derek, do you have any stray noises at your house?
I am babysitting 3 dogs and a niece, so if you hear anything weird on my end, that's what it is.
Okay, and of course I'll do my best to edit those things out, but okay. Let's get to Miirym Sentinel Wurm, David's first commander deck. Here are some things we liked about his deck, and some things that you don't always see in Miirym decks. David has included a blink and bounce sub-theme. In addition to all the dragons, he's got cards that enable him to blink and bounce those dragons. Blink and bounce are shorthand words for sending cards back to the hand. If a card is bounced, then it just goes back to the hand. If it's blinked, then it goes to exile and then returns to the battlefield. We think this is a great choice because Miirym's ability is an enter the battlefield trigger. Miirym doesn't ask you to cast the dragon. All she cares about is seeing the dragon enter the battlefield. So, blinking and bouncing them are great ways to get your dragons to re-enter the battlefield and get you more copies.
My favorite thing about the blink and bounce, well, on top of what you're doing, you're getting a lot of value with Miirym on the field.
More and more bodies on the field.
Yeah, more and more bodies for blockers, all that stuff. They're instant speed, so you can save it for protection. If someone wants to Swords of Plowshare Miirym, they say, you know what, I'm going to pay the 2. I'll spend 3 mana to get rid of this dragon because that's a pretty good thing to do.
Yeah.
With Miirym. With a blink spell, you say, you know what? I like that you want to try that, but I'm going to go ahead and bounce it. So your target is no longer valid. You wasted the mana, and I still have my dragon.
Yeah,
and
it's insane.
Maybe a new enter the battlefield trigger.
Yeah, if they're trying to remove something else.
Yeah, it really is a lot of value on one card. You know, with like 2, 3 mana or less, you're really kind of hitting a lot of bases.
Yeah. Return to hand removal is usually very cheap. It usually costs 1 or 2 mana to point at something across the field and say, nope, get that back to your hand. And it is kind of an advanced removal technique that takes a lot of practice to learn, and I'll admit that I'm still learning how to use it. It provides an advantage called tempo. If you listened to Mana Curves and Card Advantage, episode 37, and this return to hand removal provides tempo. It's mana advantage, which means that you, the caster, are using your mana more efficiently than your opponents. It can undo an opponent's entire last turn and slow them down. If they spent 6 mana casting something big, and then you spend 1 mana to put it back into their hand, well, what do they have to do next turn? They have to either basically play the same turn again, replay the card, or make a different choice and do something else.
It hurts as the person who's had this happen to. I mean, you know, we both have. We all have.
Yeah.
It's a brutal feeling. It's like, oh, my whole turn was wasted. I get to wait 30 to 45 more minutes before my turn comes back around.
Yeah.
And then I get to play the exact same thing I just did. Woo!
Yeah.
It's humbling.
And it really puts a slowdown on your opponent. Now, there is a warning here. And it's one of those more advanced ones, and it's about card advantage. This return to hand removal is usually card disadvantage. You spent a card, but your opponent hasn't actually lost it. It's still in their hand. It just moved zones. So it just moved from the battlefield to their hand, but they actually still have it. So, in order to make this type of removal worth it, you have got to take advantage of that tempo loss by making big plays before they can come back. This type of tempo loss is great. If you're going in for an attack, remove their biggest blocker and just blow them out of the water. That way, even if they do play the same card again next turn, they've still taken a huge hit from it. Any other comments, Derek, about this type of blink and bounce sub-theme?
I don't have anything significant to say, just that I really love when cards can do more than one thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that it can protect you from board wipes or target removal, and also remove things that your opponents may have that might be threatening to you. It's invaluable because it saves card slots for
and
other
plus
things.
Miirym's enter the battlefield value.
Yes.
I mean, these blink and bounce spells are doing triple duty in this deck. Protection from removal, removing your opponent's threats, and just insane added value if your commander's on the board. So yeah, we really like that.
Love a bargain.
Oh yeah. Derek, tell us about David's clone sub-theme.
Yeah, so he had a clone kind of sub-theme, which, makes a lot of sense. You want these dragons, and sometimes you can't bounce them or blink them to get repeated value. So you say, hey, you know what, that's... I don't know, what's a dragon off the top of your head that might be good? I guess maybe...
Ganax is just making lots and lots of treasures the entire game.
Well, it wouldn't work with clones because the clone would have to sacrifice itself.
Huh? No, Ganax says whenever Ganax or another dragon enters the battlefield.
Yeah,
so you
but
just make
you couldn't have two Ganaxes.
Oh, because it's legendary.
Yeah.
No. You copy the non-legendary token.
Oh, yeah, okay. If you have the non-legendary token, yeah.
If it's there.
Yeah, so the idea with the clone is to have Miirym on the field, have a dragon, and then also have a non-legendary clone of that dragon that Miirym created. You clone, you target the non-legendary ones so that we don't have to sacrifice it or to the legendary clause for another. So, I mean, let's say it was Ganax. Ganax, what's his name?
Astral Hunter.
Astral Hunter, yeah. He says when you him or another dragon enters the battlefield, create a treasure token. So you've got a Ganax on the field, the original Ganax, a non-legendary copy of Ganax, and then you play the clone on the non-legendary. That one comes in, so that's another treasure, and also another.
Because Miirym sees it.
Yeah, Miirym would see that. So it could get out of hand very fast, and I don't really have the brain power right now to figure out what kind of treasures you're getting.
I think that scenario, so you get 2 plus the third, and then you get 3 plus the fourth. So 2, 5, 8, 12 treasure by doing that.
It's a lot of money for, these clones that cost like 4 mana usually.
Yep, exactly.
So I thought it was a fun pick. We'll talk about it more later, but I think it was a fun pick.
Yeah, I mean, we just figure what's better than 2 of a dragon? 4 of a dragon.
Yeah.
By casting a clone. Like, I think that's really clever, and I think that's a really cool line. And we are going to talk more about it later. So, as we do our deck doctor today, we're going to go through our normal categories. So we're going to do ramp, card draw, and then removal. And then we'll get to the larger synergy category, which of course, in this dex, is dragons. We love to see all of those dragons. So we're going to start with ramp. David, your ramp package is really great. A very robust ramp package of over 15 cards. And I think when he sent it to us, there were 17. Derek, what do you think about having so many cards dedicated to ramp in a deck like this?
Yeah, I love it. It means you can play a lot of dragons in one turn, or hold up, play a dragon and hold up some protection or some removal. So I don't know if we've mentioned already, he's got a treasure sub-theme, and that's just kind of, the dragon and treasure kind of trope.
Yeah.
A lot of these dragons care about making treasures or, doing stuff with treasures. These treasures, they tap for any mana, so they already help with ramping and a lot of stuff.
Yeah, they're ramping, they're fixing them as colors. It's really strong, and I think that having so many cards in the deck dedicated to ramp and mana generation, I think that's the right move. I mean, your commander costs 6, and then after your commander's out, you want to be casting a dragon every turn, and whatever mana you have left over, just like you said, Derek, you can hold up for removal or card draw or something else. This deck needs to get to 8 or 9 mana as fast as it can.
Yeah, with a deck like this, kind of speaking from a Geshath point of view, you got to hold up protection because, I mean, the ward on Miirym is nice, and it will help. People will pay that ward once you've played a couple dragons. They're like, we got to get rid of this. The smart ones will. The dumb ones will deal with the dragons that are coming in instead of Miirym itself.
Yeah.
So being able to hold up some extra mana, at the end of the day, play more than one spell a turn is really how to push this deck ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely
Since dragons are so expensive.
Walk us through some of his synergistic picks. These are the cards that we really like that he already included. No notes. These are good as is.
So he had stuff like Patron of the Arts. It's a little 3/1 Dragon Noble that costs 3 mana. When it enters the battlefield or dies, create a treasure token. That's great. So now we're going from 3 mana to 5 mana on the next turn. And hopefully we can get it killed. Because it's only got 1 toughness. Hopefully we can get it killed before then, so that way we can get to 6 mana on the next turn.
Swing it in against somebody's whatever. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. He's got Dragon's Hoard, another, kind of dragon treasure trope. When a dragon enters the battlefield in your control, put a gold counter on Dragon's Hoard. You can tap, remove a gold counter from Dragon's Hoard, draw a card, love it. Or you can tap and add 1 mana of any color. So that's doing a lot of double duty. It says when a dragon enters the battlefield, doesn't care if it's a legendary, doesn't care if it's a non-legendary token.
Yeah, doesn't care if it's a token or anything. Dragon's Hoard only costs 3 mana. So it's another one of those utility 3 mana artifacts that, in this case, you can use it each turn for either mana or card draw. You get to make the choice every turn.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're bound to be getting the gold counters that you need from your dragons coming in.
Yeah, and it itself is a mana rock that you can use for any mana, and on the turn you play it. So you could chain together like Patron of the Arts with Dragon's Hoard.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and the last is the legendary background Alkalite of Bahamut. Or Bahamut? I'm not really sure.
I always said Bahamut, but I don't know.
Yeah, I always hear it every other way. I think it's because Final Fantasy does it a different way or something.
Oh, I think you're right. Yeah.
This is a background from Baldur's Gate. It's a green one. It says, commander creatures you control have. The first dragon spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. This is, great because we want cheaper dragons. A lot of these dragons cost 5, 6, 7 mana. So instead of that, let's do 3, 4, 5 mana.
Exactly.
And it just means we can cast more dragons a turn, hopefully.
Yeah, bring your entire curve down. That way you can cast, 2 dragons a turn instead of 1. And for any other deck, that wouldn't seem like much. It's only 1 extra spell. But for Miirym, it's 2 extra spells. Every dragon is 2 dragons. Mm-hmm. So the board presence that you're creating, if Miirym is on the field, is going to be insane if you can start casting multiple dragons per turn.
Mm-hmm.
The only notes that we had for this ramp section is to increase the number of 2 mana ramp. As many 2 mana ramp sources as possible. You're in green, so you have access to land ramp, rampant growth, Farseek, Nature's Lore, 3 visits. You have access to all of these. We think you should use them if you can afford them or if you can find them. There's also the talismans, which cost 2 mana. You have Talisman of Creativity, so we think you should add the Talisman of Curiosity and the Talisman of Impulse. And then if you want, you could also add the Signets. You have Izzet Signet, you have Arcane Signet, and you have Simic Signet. So you're missing Gruul Signet for some reason. We think it should be in here, especially since the dragons lean towards red. You're going to need those red.
Mm-hmm.
You had some weaker ramp choices that we think can be cut. The diamonds, Fire Diamond and Sky Diamond, those are, of course, very budget picks for beginner builders. There was a time when I liked them because they were 2 mana, but they come in tapped and only provide 1 color. So the sooner that you can evolve out of the diamonds, we think the better.
Mm-hmm.
One of the cuts that I did make was Swashbuckler Extraordinaire. He is another guy that helps you to create treasure tokens if you wanted to keep him, because when he enters the battlefield, you can create a treasure. I see the treasure theme, so you could keep him if you wanted to, but we went ahead and cut him for this deck.
Yeah, his second ability says you can sacrifice one or more treasures, and if you do, that many target creatures can get double strike, which could be a game ender right there,
Yeah.
but I feel like I want to use my treasures to get
Cast
these
dragons.
dragons out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a judgment call, you know? So if you listen to this and say, no, Swashbuckler Extraordinaire is good and I want him, keep him. Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's really all our notes on the ramp package. You seem to already realize that this deck needs a lot more ramp than normal. So having 15, 16, 18, 20 pieces of ramp, you're not going to regret those choices.
Yeah. As a Geshath player, well, like Geshath cost 8 mana,
Yeah.
and you just got to go, hit the pedal to the metal, and just all these 2-3 mana ramp spells, because you want to get to 8 mana, and in Miirym's case, 6 mana, as fast as possible, because you want to, you can't take 5 turns off, 6 turns off to
for real.
play around while people are beating you.
Yeah, people are going to be attacking you. You need to have Miirym turn 4.
If you can, yeah.
If you can. I think anything after turn 4, you're like really starting on the back foot with people attacking you. And you're gonna have to remake Lost Ground, I think.
Yeah, once you play and beat people with Miirym one time, they're gonna know, like, hey, we need to get as much damage on this person as fast as we can before Miirym comes out, and we have a whole mess to deal with.
And we got a real problem, a whole dragon swarm to deal with. So that's ramp. We like what you've got, and we just think you need to lower the curve on that ramp and get more of it. Next category is card draw. We counted at the beginning only about 9, and that included your tutors. We think that the card draw needs to go up, because if your ramp is so high and you are casting more than one spell per turn, you do not want to be sitting on an empty hand waiting for the top card of your deck every turn. So you want to make sure that you've got, I think, a little more draw. And we love some of the picks that you've already made. You've got some great synergistic picks in here. You included Corlessa Scale Singer. Ooh, I love this pick. It is 2 mana, it costs a green and a blue, a Dragon Bard, and it's a 1/4, which it's a Dragon Bard, which means you can copy it from Miirym. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may cast dragon spells from the top of your library. A lot of people don't count this as ramp, but Benjamin taught me that if you can cast cards from the top of your library, it's like having drawn a card every time you cast something there. Because you get to look at the next one. You get to see if it's a dragon, and you get to possibly keep going. So I think Corlessa is a great choice. It's not like the copy is going to do anything extra. It's just going to give you an extra 1/4 body. The next one is Draconic Muralists. This is another Dragon Bard from Baldur's Gate. It costs 3 and a green for a 4/3 body. When Draconic Muralist dies, you may search your library for a dragon card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle. Whoo! This is amazing. If Miirym's out, you get 2 of these. You start swinging against anybody because it doesn't matter, because you want them to die. So they just have to deal with his 4 damage no matter what. And then
4 damage is not nothing.
Yeah, it's not nothing. People are going to start putting their mana dorks in front of it. They'll start putting their utility creatures that they want to just sit on the back.
Yeah.
They're going to start putting them in front of a 4 power body. And when they do finally kill it, perfect. You get to search your deck for 2 more dragons.
Let me find the silver bullet to win this game.
Exactly. I love Winged Words because it's Blue's version of Night's Whisper or Sign of Blood. It's 2 and a blue, so it costs 3 to draw 2 cards, but it has text that says this spell costs 1 less to cast if you control a creature with flying. You're in blue. The entire deck is dragons. Of course you're going to have a flyer. So this is just blue and 1 to draw 2 cards. That's great.
Ironically, the 2 dragons we just mentioned don't have flying.
Okay, well, Baldur's Gate is an exception because they're all Dragonborn or whatever. Derek, tell us about Descendant's Path.
Yeah, it's a fun little guy. Green and 2, For an enchantment, at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature card that shares a creature type with a creature you control, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. If you don't cast it, put it on the bottom of your library.
This is one of those new enchantments from Lost Caverns of Ixalan.
Yeah, this was in the dinosaur...
Ixalan is a super tribal set, so this card screams tribal. If you have lots of creatures that all match the same type, Descendant's Path is going to start giving you free creatures. And it's only 3. Like, Derek, compare this to Lurking Predators.
Yeah.
If you're running Tribal, which do you like better?
If I'm running Tribal, yeah, I would run this.
Yeah.
Lurking Predators is fun.
It's half the price of Lurking Predators, though.
Yeah, and I certainly could be, saving... I don't have it on my dinosaur deck, but if in a deck like this, I would run it because I could be saving like 4, 5, 7 mana a turn, and now I can play 3 spells instead of 2, or 4 instead of 3.
Yeah, I think Descendant's Path is really great. There are some major staples in Magic the Gathering that we think you should try to add to the deck if your budget permits. Some of the cards in this category can be on the more expensive side, but some are not. Some are still, less than $5 each. I'm going to talk about Kindred Discovery first. It was just reprinted in Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Kindred Discovery is an enchantment. It costs 3 blue, and when it enters the battlefield, you choose a creature type, dragons. Then, whenever a creature you control of the chosen type enters the battlefield or attacks, you get to draw a card. So, with Miirym out, every dragon you cast is going to draw you 2, and whenever they swing, they're going to draw you cards again. Kindred Discovery being able to draw from 2 actions, both entering and attacking, that is going to keep your grip full the entire time. Especially if you manage to have, say, 5 dragons. If you have Miirym and 2 others, then that means you've gotten 2 more copies. So 5 dragons swinging out is going to refill your hand up to 5. That is really, really good.
It's absolutely one of the best tribal cards you can get in blue.
Yes.
It's recently reprinted. Pick it up if you don't have a copy, or proxy it.
TCG Player has it for less than $5. Card Kingdom has it for $8. So the thing about TCG Player, though, is their prices are usually lower, but you're usually going to end up paying more on shipping. But you can get this card for $8 right now. I know there was a time when it was around $15, so you probably want to pick it up while it's still a recent reprint.
Mm-hmm. Temur Ascendancy. Green, blue, red for an enchantment. Creatures you control have haste. That's money right there.
Oh,
for a deck like this. Whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So it's kind of like half of Kindred Discovery, but it tacks on haste. I mean, that could be a game ender there, depending on what you're playing into it.
Yeah, giving them haste. Cast any of your dragons that have power 4 or greater, and you get to draw 2 instead of only 1. Or even if Miirym's not on the field, you still get to draw, and your hand gets to stay the same size as long as you're casting dragons. Like, Temur Ascendancy is just good all around.
Yeah, for decks like this with the big mana creatures, that's the biggest problem, is that you cast it, you spend all your mana, you have to wait a whole turn before you get a chance to swing, and sometimes, usually, in our meta, someone will deal with it, and it feels bad. So being able to swing at least one time, it's better than no times, of course.
Absolutely.
But man, with Miirym on the field, you're getting 2 ideally big dragons swinging out, and you're drawing 2 cards. I think this is a must include.
I agree, and it costs $5.38 on TCG Player. So it's hovering around the $5 to $7 mark as well. I think you should include Rishkar's Expertise. This is a staple in green, costs 4 green, so it's 6 mana. But you draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. In this deck, we were searching around for high power creatures, and we think it might be 6. We think 6 is the highest power that you're working with, but it's on your commander. To pay 6, draw 6, that's an incredible rate. Plus, obviously, Rishkar Expertise's second paragraph. You may cast a spell with mana value 5 or less from your hand without paying its mana cost. You get to look at your refilled hand and pick a new card to cast.
I run this card in almost every deck I have. It's so good. I mean, it plays very much into my style, which is, drawing lots of cards and getting stuff for free.
Yeah.
I absolutely love the sensation. It's just an absolute rush to play this card, and I'm always playing big creatures, so I'm always, taking a lot of advantage of it. But, okay, so we said the biggest is like 6-ish, unless you're buffing it in some way. But the average is like 5, so it's not like the floor is like 1 or anything. It's like 5. These dragons are still huge.
Yeah, your dragons are still big. And the thing about Rishkar's expertise, with its second text, you don't have to take the turn off to draw cards. Like, that is what a lot of card draw spells tend to be, is like, I gotta take turn 3 to cast Temur Ascendancy, that way on turn 4 I can draw a card from it. Or I gotta tap out, draw 5 cards, but now I can't do anything, because I don't have the mana for it. Well, that's not the case with Rishkars. You don't have to take the turn off to draw, because you still get to cast a spell for free, of mana value 5 or less. So anyway, we definitely think if you can include Kindred Discovery, Temur Ascendancy, and Rishkar's expertise. Now, Derek is famous for skipping the draw part of card advantage. He's talked in a couple episodes now about he loves to cast spells for free. So you don't have to draw them. There are spells out there that allow you to cast spells for free directly from your library. And Derek is going to go through some of those options for us.
Yeah, so these are cards that make my Joda deck so deadly. Is because I'm paying a lot of mana one time to get a ton of things. So the first up I have is Genesis Ultimatum. Green, green, blue, 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 red, red. So, 7 total for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. Put any number of permanent cards from among them onto the battlefield and the rest into your hand, and then exile Genesis Ultimatum. Permanent cards. We're talking lands, dragons, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, anything that was there.
Yeah, I mean, let me look at what the average mana value is. So it looks like most is around the 3 to 5 range, which is, I guess, what most decks are.
Yeah.
But, I mean, let's say you hit 5 dragons, it could be, 25 mana worth of spells.
Yeah. And like, again, even if you don't hit it, get the lands onto the battlefield. And you've ramped as part of it.
Yeah.
So you've ramped, plus got a dragon or 2, maybe another spell out there.
Yeah. The lands don't come in tapped.
Maybe an enchantment. This is an instant board state.
Yeah, it's absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
I assume. I've never played against it. I've always killed my friends with it.
Oh, yeah.
Next, we have Sunbird's Invocation, red and 5 for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell from your hand, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is that spell's mana value. You may cast a spell with mana value X or less from among cards revealed this way without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Like we said, 5 mana dragons. You play a 5 mana dragon, look at top 5 cards. If they cost 5 or less, you can pick one of those 5 to play for free, and then put the rest on the bottom. I mean,
yeah, you're just getting 10 mana value worth of spells for 5 mana.
Yeah.
It's just nuts.
Yeah. You've got the mana. This is the kind of deck that wants to do these kind of things. You're already working with big mana creatures. Go ahead and double down and get lots of big mana creatures out at once.
Yeah, absolutely. We noticed in your deck that you do have another tutor, which we always count as draw in our meta. You have in your list Zerillon of the Claw. It costs 3 red for a 3/4, I think, Viashino. Is that right?
Didn't they all get turned into lizards?
Is he just a lizard now? But he has an ability where you can pay 3 and tap it to search your library for a dragon, put it on the battlefield, and shuffle. It has haste, and then you exile it at the end of the turn.
Yeah, he's a shaman lizard now.
Okay, a shaman lizard. So we do think Zerillon of the Claw is really good, because you can pay 3, slap a dragon down, get a token copy that stays, and swing with the original. We think this is great. But it does cost $10. If you don't already own it, and it was just in here as I'm going to buy it later, then we think there's a switch you should go for.
Since you have the treasure sub-theme, Magda Brazen Outlaw, red and 1, real cheap. She's a dwarf berserker from Kaldheim. She's 2/1. Other dwarves you control get +1/+0. That's not important. Whenever a dwarf you control becomes red treasure token, it's not super important.
No.
It's not important, but it's the The next part, sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So you just tutor up a dragon you want, put it on the battlefield, and go about your way. I mean, it's technically costing you 5 mana if we're going to be...
Right, because you're sacking 5 treasures.
Yeah, but I mean, it's pretty good.
Yeah, 5 mana to tutor up a dragon from your library. And, dude, she's less than $1.
Yeah.
The one that I'm looking at on Scryfall, call time number 142, 91 cents. Definitely a budget alternative to Zeralon if you don't already own Zeralon. There was a card draw spell I noticed that I think can be removed. You have an Ether Channeler. I don't think it's really doing anything in this deck. It enters the battlefield and you can either bounce a card, draw a card, or create a bird. I don't know. I think you could switch it out. One card that I am thinking about is Call to Heal. It's only 2 mana instead of the 3 mana you would need for Ether Channeler. It says return target creature to its owner's hand. Its controller draws a card. So if you chose to use it on your own creature, then you also get to draw the card and get it back to your hand. If you choose to use it on an opponent's creature, yes, they get to draw 1, but you've also done the removal that you needed. It's kind of a judgment call. But I just don't think you'll ever need the bird from Ether Channeler, and so that makes that 1 extra mana in his costs kind of extra. I don't think you need it.
Yeah.
Those are some of the suggestions we think for your card draw category. Really beef up some steady draw with Kindred Discovery and Temur Ascendancy. Get some burst draw in there with Rishkar's Expertise, and then some free spells with Genesis Ultimatum and Sunbird's Invocation. If
you do nothing, I think getting Kindred Discovery, Temur Ascendancy, and Rishkar's Expertise are going to really power this deck up just by themselves. I think they're just that strong in this deck.
Yeah, I agree. So let's move to our next category, the removal category. We talked about your Blink theme at the beginning and how we think that it's really a smart move for this deck because it's running triple duty. You can remove an opponent's threat by bouncing it to their hand. You can protect your own cards by returning them to your hand so that you can cast them again later. And you can recast your creatures to get value from Miirym. So triple duty here. We think as many of these should be instants as possible so that you can be able to use them on your opponent's turn. You had a couple of sorcery versions of this that we think you should get rid of. So one of those is Silent Departure. I think you should get rid of that and trade it for an instant. In addition to your bounce and blink cards, you've got plenty of counterspells. I think this is a great choice. Counterspells work great as an option for both removal and protection, just like your blink and bounce spells. It's really smart deck building to have cards that are doing double duty or triple duty in these categories. I think that's really smart. Some cards we think you could add. Mystic Confluence. It costs 3 blue for an instant. You choose 3, and you are allowed to choose the same mode more than once. So there's these 3 options, and you can double up or even triple up on these options if you want. You can counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. This is great when you notice that an opponent has just about tapped out or tapped out for a spell. You can say, you need to pay 3 more. And if you see that they don't have it, then it's basically a counterspell. You can return target creature to its owner's hand. That's an opponent's creature. That's your own creature. So the same bouncing that we've already talked about. And its last option is draw a card. So you can choose 3. You can say, I want to bounce my own creature, bounce your creature, and draw a card. You can say, I want to bounce your creature and draw 2. Mystic Confluence is just a really strong, very versatile spell to cast.
Yeah, it costs 5 mana, which, it's not nothing, but it's adding so much flexibility to what you're already trying to do, I think is definitely worth considering.
Yeah, I think it's worth the price. I feel like at its very worst, you hold up 5 mana and you don't spend it on your turn. You're waiting to see what other people do, and then if nobody threatens you or nobody points any removal at you or whatever, and you don't want that mana disadvantage, well, you cast it and you draw 3. Like, I think that's its floor. I think that's the floor for Mystic Confluence, is you pay 5 and draw 3. That's not the best rate, but you're up 2 cards. You traded in Mystic Confluence, replaced it, and drew 2 more. So I think that's a fine trade for the versatility that you're paying for.
Yeah.
There's an artifact that I think you should consider called Crystal Shard. It costs 3, and you can pay either 3 mana or 1 blue and tap it. So I imagine for your deck you would be paying blue because you have blue in your color identity and you can do that. It says return target creature to its owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. Well, if you are its controller, you can just choose to not pay 1. You pay 1 blue and you can bounce a creature back to your hand. So if you happen to be in a position where you're not under any threat and you have the maneuverability to, recast the same card that you just brought up and get another token with Miirym, I think that's a fine play. If you see that your opponent's tapped out, you can hit him with that tempo advantage again and say, oh, you actually didn't leave up 1 to keep your creature on the battlefield, so sorry, it goes back to your hand.
Yeah, ideally you would use this at the end of the opponent's turn, right before yours.
Yeah, you use it at instant speed, flip up somebody's spell back to their hand. I really like just the fact that it's repeatable. That you can just do it every turn, and you can use it on your own creatures or your opponents for 1 blue.
Yeah, before I had my Joda deck, I had Maelstrom Wonder, which I just added 2 more colors to Maelstrom Wonder, basically.
Yeah.
And I had Crystal Shard in that deck, and it was an overperformer. I'm right before my turn, I'm getting Maelstrom Wonder back into my hand, and I'm casting it and getting 2 more spells.
Yeah, 2 more free spells every turn.
Yeah.
And the cost was only 1 blue to get it back up into your hand.
Yeah.
So, just something to consider. I have had it in bounce decks in the past where I want to keep getting into the battlefield triggers, and it's just very convenient to be able to pay 1 blue and zip something back up to my hand. Okay, we mentioned your counterspells. We like your counterspells, but there's another type of removal that we think you really need to be taking advantage of. David's biggest asset in this deck is the big dragon bodies. These dragons have 4/4, 5/5, and 6/6 bodies. And they keep entering the battlefield, and as long as your commander's out, you're getting 2 of them. So we think that you should include more removal that capitalizes on that. David already has Dragon Tempest. This is an enchantment for 1 and a red. The first thing it does, it says whenever a creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, it gains haste until end of turn. That's already great. All of your dragons are gaining haste, which obviously for a deck that's aggro that wants to win on combat damage, that's something you need. But it has the second text. Whenever a dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to target creature or player, where X is the number of dragons you control. So whenever dragons start entering the battlefield, you can start pointing damage at trouble creatures or opponents directly to their face. And we've mentioned in the past that if you can't deal with an opponent's threats on the table, start attacking that opponent's life points directly. Player removal is threat removal. This is obviously going to be an overperformer with Miirym because each 1 dragon is 2 dragons, and they're going to start counting up for each other and getting you lots of pointed damage across the table. So Derek and I think that you should go harder in this type of removal. And there are several dragons that do exactly this.
Yeah, Scourge of Valkis is just Dragon Tempest on a dragon body.
Yeah.
Red, 2, so 5 mana total for a 4/4 dragon with flying. Whenever Scourge of Valkis or another dragon enters the battlefield, so this is not a legendary dragon, by the way.
No, it's not. No. Wow.
Yeah, this is just a dragon that's a problem child.
Yeah.
Whenever Scourge of Valkis or another dragon enters the battlefield under your control, it deals X damage to any target where X is the number of dragons you control. How would you like to do that? Twice. Or 3 times you've got Dragon's Tempest.
Yeah, it's so good. It also has fire breathing for no reason. You can pay a red and give it +1/+0. That's just not necessary, but if you just happen to have a bunch of treasures lying around, or if you happen to have a bunch of untapped mountains, and you need to add 3 more damage to somebody to kill it, well, give Scourge of Valkis fire breathing, and you can do that.
Next we have Terror of the Peaks. Red, and 3 for a 5/4 dragon. This is power creep.
Derek.
Flying. I mean, it is.
It is, you're right.
Flying. Spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. So I think that's just saying Ward is 3
Ward
life.
pay 3 life, yeah.
Yeah, so not the worst thing, but it's still, could if you have a bunch of Scourge of Alcuses, it could be a problem. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target. This is an expensive card, and it's the most expensive card we've added, I think.
Yeah.
But it was just recently reprinted in Outlaws of Thunder Junction, so
it is the cheapest
cheaper.
It's been in a while.
Yeah.
Even though it's still about $20 right now.
Yeah. Proxy if you don't want to pay that. But if you love the effects, don't like proxies, and still would like to have a card, you can do Warstorm Surge, red and 5 for an enchantment that does the exact same thing. When a creature enters the battlefield under control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. You're dealing a lot of damage with Miirym, dealing 10 damage
because you're getting
anything.
2 each time. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, if your dragon's got 4, 5, 6 power, well, Miirym is going to turn that into 8, 10, 12 power, and Terror of the Peaks or Warstorm Surge is going to turn that power into direct damage. You can send it to your opponent's creatures, but I'm just saying you can send that damage directly to your opponent's faces, which means your dragons didn't need to attack, they didn't need to have haste. Terror of the Peaks or Warstorm Surge just allowed them to blast their damage directly at your opponents anyway.
Yeah, a lot of times we'll be in a situation, or I've been in a situation, I know, this is a very common thing that's happened to players, is that you're sitting there, it's like, man, this guy's got too many walls up. He's got Ghostly Prison. He's got, propaganda, these things. I can't afford to attack him after I just paid for these dragons.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, how about I just laser him down with non-direct damage instead?
Yeah. Terror of the Peaks is $20, but just imagine Magical Christmas Land where you cast him and Miirym gives you a second one because he's not legendary. Or I guess, again, Miirym doesn't care whether he's legend. But you have 2 of him!
It's great. I mean, it's expensive for a reason.
Yeah, it's expensive for a reason because it synergizes so well. Proxy it, stick in Warstorm Surge. We think that this is a really effective way, and obviously a super thematic way. It's a very dragon way of getting your opponents out of the game.
Mm-hmm. You could laser someone down and then hit them someone else with dragons in the game.
Yeah. So in your removal package, we do think that a weakness here is that you're lacking in board wipes. We think that some of the targeted removal, like Dragon's Fire, should be removed and replaced with a couple of board wipe options. The first board wipe option that I think you should include is another dragon, and that's Steel Hellkite. This is an artifact dragon that costs 6 mana. It's a 5/5 with flying. It has basically an artifact version of Fire Breathing, which is that you can pay 2 mana to give it +1/+0 until end of turn. But then it has a second activated ability, which kind of functions as a board wipe. You can pay X, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X, whose controller was dealt combat damage by Steel Hellkite this turn. Activate only once each turn. So, another way of explaining this is that once Steel Hellkite hits somebody, you can choose the value of X, say for example 3, and you can destroy everything on their field that costs 3. Steel Hellkite is especially good at getting rid of tokens. It says destroy each non-land permanent with mana value X. So you can say X is 0, and you destroy all non-land tokens. So that's all clues, all treasures, all soldiers, all angels, all whatever. Every token that doesn't have a mana cost gets destroyed by Steel Hellkite. You will find that Steel Hellkite is its own lightning rod for removal, because everyone is afraid of you decimating their board with it.
Yeah. The weakest part about Steel Hellkite is that you only have one, so you can only choose one number a turn. But with Miirym getting 2, like, hey, maybe I'll get rid of his tokens and his tokens, or oh man, these 3 mana,
or I'm gonna hit
whatever,
all of your 3 mana stuff and all of your tokens, or whatever. And I think the weakest part of Steel Hellkite is that he doesn't have haste.
Yeah, that's
so true. You telegraph it for a turn, But I promise you, people are going to see Steel Hellkite and say, oh my god, he's about to decimate my board. But that's not a bad thing, because people are going to point their removal at it instead of whatever else you have going. If your budget can swing it, this deck is a great place for Cyclonic Rift, but it is a big budget card. Cyclonic Rift costs 1 and a blue to return target non-land permanent you don't control to its owner's hand, so it only hits an opponent's thing. It isn't instant, but you can overload it for 7 mana. When you overload, you replace the word target with the word each. So when you overload it for 7, you return each non-land permanent you don't control to their owner's hands. That is everyone else's, all 3 other players, or however many other players are left. That's all of their non-land stuff. All of their mana rocks, all of their creatures, all of their enchantments. They are wiped back to 0. I think both modes of it are great for your deck.
Yes.
You can bounce somebody's one thing, or you can overload it and just wipe everybody else's board, swing out with your dragon army, win the game. But obviously, what's it at now, Derek? 30-something more?
Probably. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's always been out of my
approximately 40-ish. Its double masters version is at 31, so that's nice.
I think it did get reprinted in the Ravnica.
It was reprinted in Commander Masters and in Ravnica Remastered.
Yeah.
So it has had a few reprints in the last year, 2-ish years. But the fact that it's still hovering in the $40 range shows you how good it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a blue staple.
Yeah, it's a blue staple. Everybody's running it. We think it's especially good for this deck. But there are some alternatives. I think that Flood of Tears is a really good alternative to Cyclonic Rift for this deck. Flood of Tears is a sorcery. It costs 6 total, 4 blue. Return all non-land permanents to their owner's hands, so that is you also. It says, if you return 4 or more non-token permanents you control this way, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So, once again, this is a board wipe that allows you to rebuild faster than everybody else, because you get to put a permanent from your hand back onto the battlefield first. You get to do that immediately. So, stick Miirym back onto the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
And then try to rebuild as fast as you can. But it's definitely a way to get your opponent's stuff off the board. A tempo rush one more time so that you can try to eke out enough advantage to win the game. River's Rebuke is another version of this Flood of Tears Cyclonic Rift effect, except it targets just one other player. Return all non-land permanents target player controls to their owner's hand. So River's Rebuke is a screw you in particular kind of card. It's going to get exactly one player and wipe them back to 0 by sending everything back to their hand.
Could be a nice political tool.
Pick the person that's in second place that has the most silver bullets against you. Pick that person, swing out, destroy them, you're done.
One thing I just realized that we could add that would have been really good for these 2 categories we just talked about is Tyrant's Familiar for dealing direct damage with Scourge of Valkis, Terror of the Peaks, Surge, that stuff. That would have been great. Goes really well. It has haste. It would be a 7/7 with Miirym on the field. 2 7/7s that are dealing 7 damage. And then also Balefire Dragon, which is a red and 5 6/6 flying dragon. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage to each creature that player controls.
Another board wipe on legs, yeah.
Yeah. Suddenly you got 2 large dragons that are just wiping the board every turn.
Yeah, that's a really, really good choice.
Yeah, so, to kind of bring the power level up, we're going to have to crack a few eggs. We mentioned the Cologne sub-theme that you had. We did think it was a neat idea, but we decided that the floor for that was too low. You would need to have Miirym out. You would need to have a dragon that's non-legendary, or a dragon that, has a non-legendary token to make. That way the clone can target that, and then you can get the Miirym copy. So we just felt like it was a lot of hoops to go through for one effect.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's a cool idea, like we mentioned before. But the problem is that if you have an empty board with no targets to copy, then you target an opponent's card that doesn't synergize with your stuff. And we think that if you fill the deck with more dragons, then you can still play a different dragon into an empty board, and it will still synergize better with your deck, we think.
Yeah.
So that was a choice that we made as the deck doctors, if you want our opinion. We think there are some powerful dragons that you can add to this deck to really up the power, and removing the clones is what gave us space for this raw dragon power and some other wacky plays that we're going to get to at the end.
Yeah. Most clones cost about 4 mana or 6 mana. It's usually 4 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And at 4, if you pay 1 extra mana, you can get a lot of dragons. Or if you, at 6, a lot of dragons are also at 6.
Yeah.
You can just have a dragon instead. So I think, there's less hoops to go through with just having a dragon in its spot. That way you know what you're going to get.
Yeah. So that's our judgment call, was we decided to cut the clone sub-theme. All right, Derek, just lay it on me. Just bathe me in Dragonfire. What are some cool dragons that we can add to this deck?
Yeah, I think my favorite on this list is Wrathful Red Dragon.
Oh, so cool.
Red 3, 5/5 flying dragon. Whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. Any target includes your opponents.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, Ben, you are not a dragon.
Yeah. Hey, it's great. Most people don't have flying blockers, at least in our meta. That's my biggest thing, is I don't have any flyer decks.
Yeah.
So you've gone to the trouble of getting a flying blocker, and now you have to decide, do you want to take the damage, or do I want to block and then take a bunch of other damage?
Yeah. Yeah, so it means even if they have a blocker, that means they're going to take as much damage as their blocker would deal. So even if it's a 1/1 bird, you can be like, well, you're not going to take my dragon's damage, but you are going to take 1 damage from your bird.
It's just... really...
It's just a lose-lose situation, man.
Yeah.
I love it.
Another one is Atarka Worldrender. Red-green 5, flying trample, 6/4 dragon. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it gains double strike until end of turn. That's one of your biggest win cons right there. Whenever
Absolutely.
a dragon attacks, it gains double strike. So any tokens, all dragons. It has flying trample, so it's hitting for 12 damage.
Yeah.
And suddenly with Atarka on the field, you gotta worry about commander damage.
Yeah.
Which, Miirym's already a 6/6, so, 12. Commander damage was never off the table, but with double strike, woof.
It gets on the table really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got Red Dragon. There was a lot of great dragon support in Baldur's Gate, thankfully. And the
it was a great set.
Yeah. Red Dragon. Red and 4 for a 4/4 flying dragon. It's got Fire Breath. When Red Dragon enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to each opponent. Some nice
player removal,
chip
man.
damage. Yeah.
With Miirym down, just slap your opponents for 8.
Yeah, here's nearly a 10th of your life going.
Oh my god. God, that's so
No,
much.
a 4th. I'm sorry, I don't do math very well.
Yeah. It's almost a 4th of their life. It is a 5th of their life.
Oh, yeah.
Math. Playing Magic has gotten us better at math.
Only if you're the blocker.
Right. I love this last one too. Thundermaw Hellkite. Again, 3 red. That's why you need a lot of red mana in this deck. For a 5/5, flying haste. Like we were talking about. We love the haste. We love being able to swing immediately. When Thundermaw Hellkite enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each creature with flying your opponent's control, but that's not all. Tap those creatures. So now that 1/1 bird that somebody had, tap it. It's not blocking. I'm hitting you in the face instead. All the angels somebody has, all the dragons that somebody else has, no, tap those creatures, and all my guys are swinging in anyway.
Yeah, I like it. It really... This deck can put a lot of pressure, because it's got the flyers. A lot of these have haste, or at least lots of ways to gain haste.
Yeah.
And they have all got big bodies. It's that's the hurdle, is you got to get past the early game as fast as you can.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Derek. So we've got one last category, and David, I was so happy that Derek, jumped up to do this deck doctor, and literally the first card he talked about is not a dragon, but I'm putting it in a category called absolute insanity.
This was just a fun little idea I had. I don't know what made me think of it or what my mindset was on the day that we were talking about it. But I thought of Brutaclad, Telcor Engineer, Blue, Red, and 4, Artificer, 4/4, creature tokens you control have haste. That your dragons you're creating with Miirym is why I'm thinking about this. And then at the beginning of combat on your turn, create a 2/1 blue mirror artifact creature token. Then you may choose a token you control. You could choose a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, each other token you control becomes a copy of that token. Suddenly you've got a sky full of, dragons. I mean, you already had a sky full of them.
Yeah, you pick your biggest, strongest, whatever dragon it is, and then all of your tokens become that dragon. That also includes all of your treasure tokens. And there's also the opportunity of the flip side, which is if you need more mana in main phase 2, choose a treasure.
Yeah.
It says choose a token you control. Choose a treasure token. You can transform all of your dragon tokens into treasures if you want. Now, I don't know if you want to do that. Maybe you want to do that for a board wipe. Maybe you want to do that for some other crazy big play. I don't know. But it's an option.
Yeah, I mean, you could, I don't know, maybe you're scared of a board wipe or something coming down the pipe, so you turn them into treasures, and then you turn them back into dragons.
Yeah.
You play a dragon, get a copy, and turn them back into that dragon.
Yeah, it's wild. I think Brutaclad is the coolest tech that you came up with. And it was literally the first thing you said when we started talking about this deck.
Yeah.
And my mind just exploded.
It is 6 mana, and it's not a dragon.
Yeah.
So, it's not the greatest thing, I suppose, but it is fun. It might be some fun little stories you get out of it.
Oh, yeah. That's a wacky play. There is one other thing that we think could add and kind of bolster your Blink sub-theme, and that's Thassa Deep Dwelling. This is the Thassa from Theros Beyond Death. Is that what it was called?
Return to Theros or something? I don't know.
Whatever Theros' second set was. So it's an enchantment creature god. It costs 3 and a blue, so 4 total, for a 6/5. It's indestructible. As long as your devotion to blue is less than 5, Thassa isn't a creature. So you have to have a certain number of other blue permanents out in order for Thassa to be a creature. It's usually actually better when they're not, because they're harder to remove. Yeah. But Thassa has this extra ability. At the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 other target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. It's just a free, once per turn, bounce a dragon, get another into the battlefield trigger for Miirym to see. Mm-hmm. And it's only 4 mana to get this enchantment effect. I think that's really good. We think it's a great choice. And she's got 1 more ability. You can pay 3 and a blue to tap another target creature. We're not saying that's the reason this is in the deck, but it's certainly not anything to point your nose up at.
Yeah, could keep you alive.
Yeah, if you've got the extra mana, you can tap down an opponent's Voltron commander or tap down somebody's blocker so that you can kill them with commander damage. Like, there's plenty of reasons that tapping another target creature is good. Yeah, your land base actually seemed pretty good to me. There were a few things that we suggested cutting, a few lands to get out of there. Really, the lands that come in tapped and then gain you a life, we kind of cut those. We definitely think that your land base needs an exotic orchard. You're in 3 colors, so your probability of having an opponent or 2 opponents that are using your colors, red, green, and blue, are very high. So exotic orchard, I put in every deck that's 3 or more colors. What about you, Derek?
Yeah, I think it's just a good card.
Yeah, I think it's just a good card because it taps for multiple colors, comes in untapped. So we think you should add an exotic orchard to your deck.
You'll get it for at least 1 color, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you're just unlucky. I've never been that unlucky before.
Yeah, me neither. Derek, what do you think is the minimum number of lands you can run in this deck? 37?
Yeah, I mean, you might be able to get away with 36, but I would really. So we've been doing this for David. It's a budget deck with some less budget friendly upgrade options, but we're still working within a budget. If I wasn't working with a budget, maybe go down to 36, 35, and just put those really
and just
powerful.
Include some triomes and fetch lands and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for this deck, I'd still stick with at least 36, maybe 37, possibly 38.
I think with the robust ramp package he has, if he's looking to keep that around 16 to 18, then I think 37 is fine.
Yeah, I would try 37, see how it plays for a game or two.
Yeah.
Because the treasures, they're kind of a thing we can't really pin down.
Right. Each game.
Yeah.
Each game, you don't know how many treasures you're going to be able to get.
Yeah, so that could affect things. But if you feel like you're not getting the colors you need, or just raw mana on the field, go up to 38. Or maybe the treasures are out of control and you could go down to 36. I don't know.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't go less than 36.
Yeah, I agree. We are giving David back a deck list. If you, listener, want to see all of the final changes we made to this deck, the deck list on our Architect page actually has 104 cards. Obviously, we know that a commander deck has 100 cards. We figured that you can decide on more cuts. You can tweak those last 3 cards depending on which theme you want to see more, depending on how it plays out the first couple of times, or if there are cards that we wanted to add that are outside of your budget. For example, Terror of the Peaks is $20, and if you decide, hey, this is my first deck, I don't want to spend $20 on a single card for a game I might not like, ignore those and not include them. And it becomes a non-decision that you don't have to make anyway. So the deck we're giving back has a few extra cards in it. You can decide on those cuts or to ignore big budget cards and get yourself down to 100. Derek, what do you think?
Yeah, it seems like a fun deck. Hopefully by you upgrading this deck with us, you're not going to overpower your meta. But if you do, send them, get them as patrons and send them our way.
Send them our way, man. We're happy to take a look at their decks too. We know that you're a Yu-Gi-Oh player. Recruit. Get those Yu-Gi-Oh players over here into playing Magic with us. And David, you are a patron. You have access to our Discord. You can play Magic with us. We are ready and excited to play Magic with you. All right, Derek, how can people contact us if they have questions for the overall podcast, My Mythical Meta, if they want to send us a news from the Warfront? How can people contact us directly?
They can pull out a pen and paper and write down what they'd like to say, shove it into an envelope, write it to their local podcast center, and
I was going to say, nope. You can put your address. Do not put mine. Smoke signals are another way.
We'll keep an eye out for them. Just tell us the direction.
Hire a Skyrim courier. Letter just came for you. Okay. The email address, Derek, since clearly you don't even know.
I don't. I had to stall, and I still don't know.
mymythicalmeta@gmail.com. Don't forget that even if you're not a patron, you can still get 10% off at eldoradogaming.com by using the promo code META. Thank you guys so much for listening. David, we wish you the very best, and we want to thank you again for being a patron. Derek, thank you for being my great friend. Adios.
Oh, I do what I can. Later, guys.
This episode was sponsored by Eldorado Gaming. Use the promo code META for 10% off your order. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. This episode was edited by me, Travis Konishek, and our intro and outro music is by Tyler Heath of the Oh Hellos.